All systems go. Clear for liftoff.
What's going on, golf fans? It's your boy, GS Luke, here with our Round 4 live stream for the Memorial. Going to get you ready for all of your lineups with any of your questions in the chat, look at the weather and some strategy as well. And we'll go through some ownership, some strategy in building lineups in DraftKings, pretty much everything that you need to know before building your lineups. So first off, say hi as you guys are getting into this chat. Also, smash that like button if you haven't already. And any player deep dives, feel free to go ahead and throw them in the chat. And when we get to that section later, I'll go through all of them for you. But they got Goku Lect always early. Welcome on into the live stream. We got Wayne down there too, calling a Fleetwood -6. I guess we'll have to give the credit to you if he pulls through. I think that's a pretty sharp take, I'd say. Adam asking about why McNeely isn't in the contest. I noticed that myself. He was skipped out on the pricing and no idea, Adam. And I think it's too close to lock to Adam, so we won't have him for the round 4 slate. We got C. Floyd, Brian down there, also Steven as well. And Steven says he can hear DJ's voice reminding us that Scotty's a god in 27 religions. Yeah, first off, remembering the big guy always brings a smile to my face when I think of James. And yeah, Scotty's a god. I think we've established that at this point. But we got Hart down there. Let's get after the slate. So first off, I want to take a look at the weather, which for today was slightly favorable towards the morning side. But it is the slightest of all edges. It was 0.12 shots, which is kind of what we thought would happen, right? We didn't think it was going to be a massive edge between the morning and afternoon. Really, the only difference conditions-wise was the fact that the course was going to get firmer and faster. Tomorrow, though, looks like there might be a little bit of a bigger edge to be had. Now, the added caveat is that it is a Sunday showdown slate, so it's not like you can go all in on a weather edge anyways, as placement points have to be a part of your picture, and you're still going to want some earlier to mid starters anyways, regardless of the slate that you're playing. But it does look like a different weather dynamic. So the tee times are about the same, I believe, as what you had for today. Actually, about an hour earlier than what you had for round number 3. So they're starting about 8 a.m. And you can see in the morning, though it's going to be a little bit cooler, it looks like it's going to be lower sustained winds for at least maybe the first 4 or 5 hours. I would say that just like today, where it was like a 0.1, a 0.2 shot difference between the two sides, it's probably shaping up to be that same kind of thing, where the winds in the afternoon perhaps make it a little bit harder to hit greens, and you're not going to hit the ball as close to the holes when the greens start to firm up. So nothing that you can really make all that actionable, maybe a little bit bigger of an edge than what you had for the day before. The only reason I say that is that the greens are going to continue to get firmer and faster as the week goes on. But again, there's not only so much you can do with that sort of thing. So I would say that you're always going to take your later starters to try and get those placement points, but I'm not against some of these like 9 to 10 o'clock tee times for some leverage, because no one's going to use those guys at the bottom end of the board. And I'm not saying to use more than 1, maybe 2 in a lineup of the guys going off early. But if you're using a lot of your conviction plays up top that are going to be over 20% owned, then you're going to need some leverage to offset that sort of thing. So the kind of players that I'd be talking about for that, like might be your Ludvigs. Maybe rather than going with a spend up that's in contention, you could try and go after a nuclear round from one of these early guys. It could be a Luddy O'Bear. There's a few other studs towards the top, like a Hideki Matsuyama, Victor Hovland towards the top end of the pricing, that if you want to go at Justin Thomas, you could throw out there as well. You've got Tommy Fleetwood, Colin Morikawa. Any of these guys that are towards like the middle to the early part of tee times are going to be your lower owned, higher leverage spots that you can take. So while it's not like a massive quote unquote weather edge here, there is an edge to taking some of those game theory pivots. So, but speaking of, we're actually going to look through the top end of ownership for tomorrow. I already have my ownership projections and a lot of my stuff done at this point. So a pretty good idea of how the slate is shaping up. And what I have on here are the top 10 highest owned plays for tomorrow. So this should give you guys a good idea where that ownership is coming in. And a lot of these players that we have highlighted right here, you're going to have to use in lineups because, like I said, it is Sunday. You have to have probably 3 guys in the top 5 at the end of the day. But because these players are so much higher owned than we typically have for chalk on a showdown slate, you have to navigate your lineup construction a little bit differently. And we're going to touch on that a little bit in more detail towards the end when we're building lineups together. But you should have 2, maybe even 3 of these guys towards the top in lineups. It's just that you have to know and have to have some perspective for the ownership that you're taking so that you know how many pivots and how low owned of pivots that you need for your last 2 to 3 spots. So Scotty Scheffler is about 50% owned. That is an extremely inflated ownership number. We've got Ben Griffin at number 2 at ownership at about 36%. Nick Taylor at about 30% themselves. So that's your top 3. You'd expect those players to be the most chalky, and it's pretty much all your guys under par that you have over 15%. So even players like a Cantlay that are starting a little bit further back, they're going to be getting a lot more steam than the rest of the field, which does not mean that they're terrible plays. Those placement points do make their projection quite favorable when you compare them to other players around them. And these are from my Patreon page, so that's why a lot of the stuff on here is blacked out. I do have to keep that behind the paywall for my members on my site. But if we had the projected points on here, you'd be able to see that, these guys towards the top, this top 5, top 10, they outscore the rest of the field by like 5 to 10 points at times. So it's worth the squeeze to try and take 2 or 3 of these guys into every single lineup. Just have that perspective a little bit further down the line. So of course, guys, if you want my projections, that sort of thing, you'll have to find those on the Patreon page. But SHIPIT Nation also has some really good stuff on themselves. Just hasn't published them quite yet. So just wanted to give you guys a little bit of perspective there onto what the high owned guys are going to look like with their ownership. What I like to do next is to go through building and player pool together. So you have an idea on whether we've got ownership for at least the top end of it kind of figured out at this point. Now we've got to figure out who the heck to play. And we're actually going to do this a little bit backwards of what we typically do, because I want to talk about the contests that are available. And yesterday I kind of hinted at this. It's something that I do quite often with my exposure is I'll start with the contests available, kind of figure out where my exposure is going to be before I start figuring out my player pool, because I think it's always best to know the kind of contest that you're entering first so that you can kind of try and pick out players for it. You can choose to do it the other way around as well. You can pick a player pool first. That's usually what we do here in the live streams, but for the sake of spicing it up, we're going to do it this way around this time. No really rhyme or reason for it, but just to try and maybe make this a little bit of a different format for once. So the showdown contests for tomorrow are a little bit bigger than days 1 through 3. So you can see this one's a $250K contest and the big $25, which does make it a little bit less top heavy because the first place prize is the same as when it was for 200K, but now it's only a 5th to first place rather than a whole 4th to first like you had for rounds 2 and 3. So I kind of like that one a little bit more, but these single entries are typically where you'll see me getting my exposure. Like this 35K long drive, I'll 100% have a lineup in it, and it is a little bit less top heavy than rounds 2 and 3 because of the added entries. It's a little bit larger as well than what you had in rounds 2 and 3. So I like the fact that it's a 7th to first place rather than a 5th to first place like you had for the last few rounds. The 150 max, by the way, I ended up taking a 150 max rather than only entering like 50 lineups today. I woke up in the morning, was feeling good about my exposure. Didn't even end up being that great of a day. So I guess I should have stuck to the 50 lineups. My wallet at least would have liked that one a little bit more. But this payout structure is the exact same. I mean, it's a 6th to first place, so I guess it's a little bit better than what they had with the 5th to first. It was a 50K drive the green, and you still had the 10K to first place. I'm not sure if I'm going to max enter it this time. Like I'll probably go with those 50 entries until I get that FOMO in the morning before lock, wake up at 7:30, get that coffee in my system. Then maybe we add some extra entries. And I hardly was able to get those entries in because it was filling when I first woke up in the middle of the night, decided to add them. I'm guessing that with these 14K entries that it's probably going to be the same thing. So there could be some overlay watch here. I do have to say that like it took until the morning for that to fill in the $5 yesterday. The fact that they made it bigger is kind of surprising to me just because they didn't have a whole bunch of interest in that contest. And it's because of the payout structure, right? When it's a 5th, it's 6th to first place like you even have for today. It's sub-ideal. And I think a lot of people are looking for better payout structures. So maybe DraftKings will learn from that and try and give us things that are a little bit better. But you've got this 5K caddy. That's another single entry. Look at that. My guy Gokulek showing up there. He must have reserved his entry real early because he's towards the top end of that list, but he knows what he's doing. You can tell he watches the content and follows the sweaty tryhard mentality because you play in these sustainable contests. This one is 10% to first place, and you're going to have a much better time long term. So get like Go Collect, get on top of reserving your entries ahead of time. And it's not even just those ones. Like you have the $33 dog leg. You've got the Albatross, which is a $12 contest. This is also 10% to first place. That are the best contests to enter. So with that in mind, kind of knowing that I'm mostly going to be single entry heavy, and I've already built my player pool. I already knew I was going to be a little bit single entry heavy. If you know that ahead of time, then you're going to have to play some chalk towards the top, because large field GPPs, you need at least 2-3 guys towards the top. Single entries, you probably want 3 or 4 guys towards the top in a lot of your lineups. You can afford to take more chalk because you don't have to beat as many lineups. You don't need as much leverage to get to the top 5 or even winning that sort of a contest. So we're going to have to try and find some chalk that makes some sense. And let's sort this by shots gained, ball striking. We have the round 3 stats up here right now. And you guys, if you've been to these live streams before, you guys will probably know at this point, ball striking, the most consistent part of golf. So these guys that were able to gain strokes ball striking today and are towards the top, maybe could make another push tomorrow, because that part of the game is going to be a little bit more consistent from round to round, and especially if they weren't getting a whole lot of their game with the short game. So for example, Sip Straka, Scotty, they made their fair share of putts today. Straka over 2 strokes gained putting. Scotty maybe not as much, right? Only 1.2 shots gained putting. He's also a god amongst men, so maybe we should expect that from him. But like a Jacob Bridgman, who gained nearly 3.5 strokes with his irons, and then was actually a loser between the short game categories. Bridgman, by the way, one of the best putters on the tour. So the fact he only gained 0.4 strokes is actually well below his baseline. This is like a perfect popper heading into Sunday. Now, the thing with Bridgman that kind of outweighs this to some extent is the ownership. He's at T10. He's one of the 6K guys that's going to be getting a lot more ownership than the guys around him. And I know on that list before, we didn't have Bridgman on it. Towards the bottom end of that list, by the way, it was like Cantlay, Henley, Lowry, that are about 17 to 18% owned. He's close to the 14, 15% mark, though. So just because he wasn't on that spreadsheet before, right, doesn't mean that he's not getting the steam himself. So if you're going to play a Bridgman, you just have to know that, you know, he's getting that kind of ownership. But because I'm a little bit more single entry heavy than normal, I'll just give you guys a peek behind the wall. Bridgman's in my player pool, and it's mostly because the shots gained metrics make a whole lot of sense. But you can have a few guys like that in your player pool. In fact, you need a few players like that to get those placement points. Just make sure that you have some low-end pivots mixed in there as well. It's a shame that Mav McNeely isn't in the pricing, because he did have a really good ball striking day. In fact, it was a really big bummer when I was going through my process, because I really wanted to play Maverick after he played, especially because he's at T12 and he has legit placement point potential, right? It's not like this was a guy who's at the bottom end of the board and got overlooked by the DraftKings interns. This is somebody that's legitimately in contention at this golf tournament. So I'm not sure if they're going to add him. I think it's, again, a little bit close to lock to actually add him into the pool. So unfortunate that he's not going to be somebody that we can use. I guess if you're on FanDuel and they have him in the pricing, you could consider it on that kind of side. But a Russell Henley, he gained nearly 3 strokes ball striking today. But you could see on this far right side, he lost nearly 3 strokes with the putter. So this would be a perfect regression candidate as well, kind of like a Bridgman, where if he hits the ball like he did today, and then he's just a little bit sharper with the short game, could be a really good Sunday round. And at T10 as well, has that placement point potential. So, going along with those single entry sort of contests, like I can afford to take like a Bridgman, a Henley, maybe even a Scotty up top. And then because it's a single entry and I'm not entering against thousands of other entries, I might be able to take a 4th guy on top of that. That's towards the top, which is probably as chalky as I would go in that sort of a contest. But your last 2 players better be low owned. It's just like the last few days where sometimes you want to scroll down a little bit to find the players further down the board. A Justin Thomas, a Tommy Fleetwood, really setting up well with the stats. They're going to be low owned because they're studs, and they're not starting in the top 10 like a lot of the other studs are. Like, for example, Cantlay will be like 17, 18% owned. Lowry is going to be getting all of that kind of steam. JT Fleetwood could even be a third of the ownership in some contests tomorrow. So if you're looking for ways to get different, it's these sort of players. It might be a little bit harder, or a little bit, you might not want to do it up top, just because there are a lot of those 9, 10K guys that look like really good plays with the placement points. But if you choose to make that pivot towards the top, it does make your life a little bit easier down the line. You can use some of the chalk in the 7K range if you need to still find those top 5, top 10 points. But a few other pivots that could make sense. And Adam Hadwin's ball striking it well. He also has a really good track record at this course. Ryan Gerard kind of stands out. He had about 1.5 strokes ball striking today and is sitting at T15. So maybe not a leverage piece, but a decent conviction play, I'd say, towards the top. But your Cam Youngs, your Siwoo Kims, a lot of these ball strikers that didn't get a whole lot of out of their games could be used for the next round's action. And we also look at the short game regression. So a lot of times we look at the shots gained putting and guys that lost a whole lot of strokes in the putting area around the green and try and find some bounce backs. So per the stats, Harry Higgs looks like a pretty good bounce back, gained just under 2 strokes ball striking, but lost about 5 strokes in the short game categories. Even these guys like a Rose, Henley that lost those strokes with a putter, you'd expect it to come around. A Shane Lowry, he sets up really well stat-wise for tomorrow, gained about 3.5 strokes, almost 4 strokes with the approach play, but lost over 2.6 in the short game. These sort of players are also worth a few looks. And it's not just the fact that they lost strokes that it's good, right? You need to marry it up with decent shots gained metrics, right? That's why we looked at a Lowry, a Henley mostly, because their metrics really stood out from round to round. But these guys that lost, like a Rose, for example, that lost off the tee and on approach, you'd only be using a Justin Rose in the large field GPPs to get super different to the field. And if you're a 150 max, or if you're playing in the big $5 or $25, you're going to need some really ugly plays in there as well to try and get that leverage and offset some of that chalk you may be playing. So let me get a sip of water. Let's see if there's any player deep dives that you guys want from me down in the chat. After we go through any of those, we're going to hop over, build a lineup on DraftKings, and I think we'll be good for tomorrow. So let's get after it. What's going on, Steven? Cheers to you. We got our water here. We got Ross down there as well. He says, Scotty with the 54-hole lead. You don't like the field's chances. I agree with you. Like I said, he's a god amongst men. He's playing. He's just locked in right now. He looks like he's just in that happy zone, that, as they say, flow state. I see it happening too. Also, he said that was U.S. Open conditions and Scotty passed the test. I actually think Oakmont's going to be even harder, but that's as close as we're going to get for a regular tour event. So yeah, I think that at Oakmont, he's going to be easily the most bet player, probably the best odds too. He's going to be tough to stop. That's for dang sure. All the guys who shot -3 or better were all over par today. Yeah, so that's some regression for you, Brian, right? The guys that played super well don't always do it the next day. Part of that is variance too. I'm not sure if it's like every guy that played well had a terrible day the next day, but that's crazy, man. Hey, that makes the leaderboard a lot more interesting, I'd say. It flips it on its head. You said apart from JT. Good old JT. We love ourselves, Justin Thomas. Your boy Steve is still okay. You said you believe you could go 6 or 7 under here. Yeah, 4th place heading into the final round, I think is a pretty good spot to be. Wish he didn't go bogey on the last few holes. That obviously is a little bit disappointing, but we'll have to see what Scotty does, man. Like, if Scotty shoots -2, no, Spieth's not going to win, right? But if for some godforsaken reason Scotty doesn't have his best stuff tomorrow, then there's a whole lot of guys with a chance. Except Straka, I bet him for an outright this week. I'd love to see him have another -6 round. It's probably not going to happen. It's super hard to follow up a low round with another, especially at Muirfield Village. We'll see, though, man. I just want it to be close. I don't want, Scotty to go out there and win by 5-6 again. It wouldn't be that interesting to watch as a spectator. And he said, yeah, I agree with you. I think Jordan looks pretty good. Deep dive on Cauley and Pendrith. Sure, let's go through those. So first off, Bud Cauley, he had a really good round too, but today was a little bit more pedestrian. Lost about a stroke to the field. It was the short game though. He lost nearly 3 strokes around the green, which doesn't happen often. He could have cleaned up that driver as well, but he had 5 birdies or better. So almost 2 over the field average today. So though he did have a lot of mistakes, hence why he lost a stroke to the field, he played a lot better than the scorecard in the shots gained metrics would really indicate. So I like myself some Collier. Then the other one was Pendrith, right? Pendrith, somebody I think sets up pretty well heading into the last round. Ball striking it well, over a stroke gained in the 2 ball striking categories, but lost a stroke and a half putting. So I love Pendrith. He's like a 10 out of 10 stat profile, especially at T20. He's not going to get all the steam as like the guys at T10, T12, but he still has plenty of placement point potential. It's worth noting, by the way, just to go back to the leaderboard, the other one, by the way, Bud Cauley's like a 6.5 out of 10 would say. These T20s, like I know there's only 3 of them. These T23s too, I think are at like the perfect spot ownership wise because they're not getting as much respect as the T15s, the T12s or T10s are. Like in some cases, they're half the ownership down here and they have almost just the same chance to finish top 10. If you shoot -2 tomorrow and you're at T23, that's top 10 right there because a lot of people ahead of you are going to come back to the field, right? It's not like you're just getting 2 strokes starting at T23. It's going to be 2 strokes plus everyone coming back to you. In fact, if you're T20 and you shoot -2, let's say you end up at even par, there's a chance that that's like a T7 or better. Like a lot of these guys up here are going to shoot over par tomorrow. And something else to note is that the placement points do matter, especially at a difficult golf course like this. This course, it probably matters even more so than most because of how difficult it's likely going to be. It's not necessarily the weather. I'm a big prop guy, so I'm already looking ahead at some of the conditions. The pin setup at this golf course on Sundays can make it play like 3 over par. Like they don't need wind to make it play difficult. There have been round 4s at Muirfield Village where it's been a perfect day, 70 degrees, sunny, no wind at all, where it's played like 2.5 over par. So what that means for these top level players is you still have to score to make the DraftKings lineup, right? That's why even if you're playing some of these guys towards the top, you still need them to crack par to make it to the optimal lineup. So that's why when we were going through the ownership before, I said like really be sold, really just commit to these players if you're going to use them, because they still have to score to get there. And a lot of those guys towards the top are not going to get there. In fact, a lot of them are going to go backwards and are going to be absolutely terrible Sunday showdown plays. I mean, think about it this way, right? You take a guy starting at like T7, T10, and they shoot 3 over par and they end up, let's say, at like T25 with the +3 score. That's absolute dog meat right there. That's not going to do jack shit for you in your lineups. Just don't think that the placement points are everything, right? They're not. You still have to score. And these guys that are a little bit further back at like +3, +4, they could still top 10 at the end of the day. So don't sleep on those players. I think a lot of times people, are usually flocking to that top 15 when it comes to their placement points, but especially at a golf course like this, you might want to open it up just a little bit more. And to bring it all together and wrap this thing up, let's build a lineup or two together to give you guys some perspective. And I usually like to start with my placement points. I like to pick my guys towards the top that I'm taking my stands on, and then move on with the rest of my lineup. So we're going to start with Scotty on this one. He is expensive, but I really think he wins this thing by like 3 or 4 tomorrow. I hope it doesn't happen just because I want to see an entertaining golf tournament. But the fact of the matter is that's the most likely outcome, I would say. So let's throw Scotty Scheffler into there. Let's use a Jordan Spieth too. Let's go with the Texan combo just for shits and gigs. Let's throw in a Jacob Bridgman. He set up well with the shots gain metrics. Also gives you some placement points. And then let's drop down to this like T26 range, right? Where we can find a slightly more leveraged option. And let's go with Eric Cole. Eric Cole, probably not somebody that is on a lot of people's radars, but that's just a good thing, right? It's going to give us sub 10% ownership there, which is crazy on a guy that could still finish top 5. Like Eric Cole is not getting any of the steam of a lot of those other top tier players. And he still has, I don't want to say the same equity to finish top 5, top 10 as a lot of those other guys, but a similar level of top 5, top 10 equity. So for our last 2 players, let's try and find our real big leverage pieces. So these are 2 guys where we're getting pretty much all of our leverage in this lineup. Let's go with a Matt Fitzpatrick with this course history. And then for your last man in, I would probably avoid guys like Pendrith there. I would avoid Fox, Gerard. Players are going to be 15 to 20% owned because we already have 3-4 players that are getting that ownership. And Cole kind of was a pivot for us, but he's still not like a sub 5%er like you're getting with a Matt Fitzpatrick. Ideally for your last man in here, I'd be looking at your like Minwoos, maybe your Davis Thompsons of the world. Mackenzie Hughes, by the way, a player that's due for some short game regression as well. I know we didn't go through every single player in the field when we went through the shots gained, but he is a guy that kind of sets up well too. You might want to leave some salary on the table, right? You'd be doing that if you went down to Mackenzie Hughes. If you're in the large field GPPs, and that was kind of the idea when building this lineup, is that we're trying to take down the big $5 or $25 contest, which you're going to have the nuts for. Hence why I have 3-4 guys towards the top here, because if you're going to have the nuts actually take down a contest against 14,000 other people, if there's 4 guys towards the top that have a decent day, you're going to have them in that kind of a lineup. So that's why especially in those kind of contests where you have all those entries that you're playing against, I'd go to your Minwoos, maybe your Thompsons as your last man in there, just so that you know that you're not going to duplicate yourself with other people. And so that if those players have a big day, I mean, -3, regardless of where you start, is an optimal play tomorrow. You shoot -3, -4 for sure is going to be an optimal play. You could be starting a dead last to do that. These last few guys, like Matty Fitz, maybe one of those Lee Thompsons, that's what you're hoping for. You're just hoping they go out early, that they don't get too down on themselves, quit early, that kind of thing, and are able to pull out a -3, -4 out of their ass. So if they can do so, they'll be an optimal play, a guy that you're getting at super low ownership as well. And that's the hardest part of the Sunday Showdown slate. I would say that up top, picking your conviction plays, it's not always easy to pick the right conviction plays. Don't get me wrong. There's plenty of slates where I haven't gotten it right before, as I'm sure a lot of you guys out there can probably empathize with yourselves, right? Sometimes you just pick the wrong guy to win and you got to deal with the consequences after. But the really hard part of Sunday Showdown is getting the early guys that go off correct. And just to give you guys a few pointers on that, I like to look at the shots gained ball striking as we were going through before. You can look at the short game regression candidates, but course history, you've heard me mention that a few times about players. I use that. I also look for those high birdie percentage players. And the other day we were on PGATour.com and I showed you guys where to find that. Just to do it again, you click stats, you click scoring, and then you scroll down to birdie or better percentage when this decides to load, and you can find the guys that make the most birdies this year. And I know it sounds super simple, but when DraftKings scoring is so tied to the amount of birdies that you're making, and score and raw DraftKings scoring still matters on Sunday Showdown, you could use this to find some of your super low-owned players as well. So that's all I've got, guys. Best of luck with all of your lineups for Sunday. I hope to see a lot of your names towards the top end of those leaderboards, and I hope we can finish this week strong. It'd be cool to see this event kind of get close towards the end tomorrow. Maybe Ben Griffin can give Scotty a run for his money. That'd be kind of cool to see. But if it's a Straka, if it's a Jordan Spieth that is making his way up the board too, that'd be pretty cool to see at the same time. But other than that, guys, I appreciate all your support here on the channel. Smash that like button if you guys haven't already. And we're going to be doing a prop and betting live stream a little bit later on tonight. So if you're a big underdog and prize picks person, if you're betting on the sports books, on like matchups, that kind of thing, feel free to check out my live stream a little bit later. That'll be on the LukeDFS YouTube channel. You can find me on YouTube here or X/Twitter. You can find the links to that sort of stuff. And yeah, join the SHIPIT Nation so you guys can get the stone for tomorrow. Join my Patreon page so you guys can get all those projections and player pool stuff that I was mentioning before. And let's have ourselves a slate. It's like I said, I want to see a few of your names towards the top there.